I'm Neil, and I am the Digital Marketing Officer at Autism Bedfordshire. Today, we are here with Mandy Higgs, Gill Christmas, and Lottie Strutt from Embracing Nutrition. Today, we're just going to talk through what each of our organisations do and how we can help each other's organisations and some helpful tips for you guys. So we hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.
Hi, so I'm Gill Christmas. I'm the funding manager at Autism Bedfordshire. Basically, my role is to secure the funding required to cover the costs of Autism Bedfordshire's activities and services for autistic people and their families. This includes sourcing grants and donations from trusts and foundations, from local authorities, local and regional businesses, and community fundraisers. The work involves setting budgets for all our services, monitoring expenditure and the income that we're getting in against the budgets, writing grant applications and reporting back to funders to show how the impact that their support has helped achieve. I sort of got into this following a career really supporting a whole load of different businesses improve the quality of their service that they provided to customers. And I also got involved in skill development training for the staff. But in 2003, after the birth of my daughter, I joined Autism Bedfordshire, basically because I wanted to work for an organisation that makes a difference to the lives of disadvantaged people. And at the time, the charity was really quite small, but had visions of expanding and developing, which I was really excited to be part of. I moved into the funding role in 2005, initially starting to get grants for our summer scheme, but over the years, we've grown and developed new services, and so at the moment we're kind of looking at around about £1 million to cover all our services for the year. There's ever increasing competition for funds, and so grant applications and reports really need to stand out and show the impact of what we do. And yeah, that's what I love doing, and why I've been with the charity for quite a long time.
Hi, so I'm Mandy Higgs. I'm Autism Training Manager at Autism Bedfordshire, which basically means I manage the training. I write it, develop it, coordinate it, deliver it. At least certainly all the Autism Bedfordshire run practitioner training, plus training commissioned by the local authorities and other agencies and private providers. I also deliver quite a lot of the local authority commissioned parent training, parent carer training, alongside our children's services team. Autism Bedfordshire also provide an education consultancy service because my background in autism advisory work for another local authority gives me some knowledge and expertise in that area. The Department for Education have also got me registered as an inclusion expert, which means I get to make recommendations about things like SATS paper content. And I think one of our trustees is also one of those as well. They've been very quiet recently, can't think why, something to do with the pandemic and there not being any SATs, presumably. My interest in special needs and disability basically started when I was training to be a teacher. That was then renewed when I had my own two children. My eldest was diagnosed with Asperger's at the age of 6, and the youngest followed suit at the age of 18. Prior to having the children, I'd actually gone out of teaching and worked in business. So I'd done marketing, direct marketing, conference organisation, event management, that kind of thing. But then I came back into teaching after a lengthy spell being a teaching assistant. And I did some independent parent support work as well at the Bedfordshire Parent Partnership Service when it was first created. But also I completed a postgraduate certificate in autism and Asperger's syndrome in 2005. And I landed my dream role, which was autism advisory teacher in 2008. And I'd still be there, but they the local authority in question, not Bedfordshire, chose to make us all redundant in 2012. So I went independent and then started my part-time training delivery role with AB. And that role has increased substantially over the last 7 years. Yeah, there's a lot that we have to do, and I am only term time, and I'm rather glad that I get the summer holidays to recuperate.
Hi, so I'm Lottie Strutt. I am working for Embracing Nutrition with the speciality skill set that I've got a fellowship in ADHD and ASD. My huge desire in life since I was about 10 was working with children with extra needs, whether it be physical or mental. And I have strived through my whole life to go, how can I make a difference for children and these families and adults? So I trained as a physiotherapist and specialised in children's health, from cerebral palsy to Down syndrome to ASD to ADHD. And I worked and absolutely loved my physio job, worked with children and young adults for probably 12 years, and just started wondering there's slightly more to holistic health than just physiotherapy. So yes, you can put the hands-on skills, you can get people stronger, you can give people sensory needs, like support them, and then I realized there was a bit more to it. So is there more to holistic health? And that's where my nutrition came in. So then I retrained and tried to put my brains together from a nutrition and physio perspective. And then one of my absolute passions in life is those who have been diagnosed with, or not diagnosed with actually, but potentially are struggling from an ASD point of view, that they're not reaching their full potential. And I think that's how Autism Bedfordshire came for me to come join the dots, because actually what you guys do makes me feel like you're doing the thing that I would like to be able to do, but I'm doing it from like the inside and you guys are doing it from the outside. So I have an absolute passion to try and encourage people to reach their goals, whether they're physical, whether they're emotional, whether they're mental, whatever they are, but it's trying to put in place people reaching those goals. So obviously it's really important for you and I are different companies, and it's important to understand a bit about what we both do. So just out of interest, it'd be really important to understand like why you guys went into specialising in the areas that you did.
Well, for me, what really motivates me to do what I do is the fact that most autistic people share the same dreams and aspirations and hopes as everyone else. But the unrelenting stress and anxiety that they feel every day presents, very real barriers to them achieving their dreams. Just like anyone, they want to make friends and do well at school. They want to fit in, get a job, live independently, and to be happy and fulfilled in their lives. Many just simply want to be not to be seen as silly or weird. But the reality is that because of their anxieties that they feel every day, they may behave in odd ways, that other people won't necessarily understand, because autism is a hidden disability. You don't look at someone and know that they're autistic. And so the public can be very judgmental of any unusual behaviour. And the result is that, these people are lonely and isolated, misunderstood, and, and they have the right to not feel like that. And over the years that I've been with Autism Bedfordshire, I've seen the very real differences that our services have made to people's lives, because they provide places where autistic people are accepted and not judged for who they are or how they behave. And if they become anxious, our specialist staff can support them. And I have literally seen children who come to us really shy and withdrawn and frightened, blossom into, confident and independent individuals who are actually, making a success of their lives. And it really is the most rewarding thing that I've ever done, and yeah, it's just incredible.
And for me, I mean, I guess my interest in the area started when I became a parent, and I went on a very steep learning curve because my understanding of autism was very limited until my own elder child was diagnosed, at least. And obviously, watching my own children grow up, watching the things that they've had to go through, it made me more alert to the difficulties that autistic people were presented with. And I got to the point where I began to feel quite passionate about this. Apparently it was my passion for it that got me my job as an autism advisory teacher, because it wasn't my autism advisory experience. It was fed back to me some years after my interview by one of the people who'd interviewed me, that it wasn't about the qualifications at that time, it was about the fact that I cared. And, the irony is, as most of my colleagues know, training still makes me feel incredibly anxious. I absolutely loathe delivering training, but I feel so passionately about just getting the knowledge out there and raising awareness and correcting some of the myths and misunderstandings about autism that I just have to make myself do it, basically. How about you, Lottie?
Well, it's interesting the way that you're talking about anxiety, because it's one of my huge beliefs, because I work with actually quite a lot of teenagers as well, never mind what diagnosis is, but that have anxiety. And it's one of my passions in life to go, we shouldn't be feeling anxiety. And my gosh, like, teenagers have got enough going on, let alone when you add on something else into the bucket to make life harder. And I think my biggest interest in particularly functional medicine and nutritional therapy is you get to look at some of the whys. So I appreciate that when you have an autistic individual, they do have certain things that they might struggle with, but I feel like there are certain levels that actually, when you have someone who's anxious, do they need to be anxious, and why are they anxious? So my job is always to go, yes, but why? So why is someone anxious? Can I do something about that, so that that cloud can be lifted from you and you can go forth and make friends, and you can go and do the things that you want to be able to do and join in without those feelings? And so some of the whys that we often get with functional medicine is actually, if we look into their systems and why something might be presenting symptomatically, for example, anxiety, actually we know in the gut there's good bacteria in the gut which create our happy hormone serotonin. And if your gut is slightly out of balance, which it is known that autistic individuals have got changes in their microbiome, and I change that for them, then in theory, you guys doing what you do, which is encouraging them to feel brilliant about themselves and get that confidence, and me getting rid of their feelings of anxiety, because deep down inside them at a microscopic level, we're changing some of their neurotransmitters and feeding their brain full of happy, calm hormone. Together, you can do an amazing job with individuals where they then don't have that cloud falling over them and taking away from their true ability. So that's my passion, is whether it's a cerebral palsy child in a wheelchair who wants to meet a goal of standing up and having a wee for themselves, that's an incredible goal, versus an autistic individual saying, I want to be able to go to the shop and choose what I want to buy and then take it to the till and go home and cook it. Incredible. Let's try and allow them to do it with you guys doing what you do and me doing the part, which is let's allow your brain to work incredibly well so that you can go forth and make those decisions and make those choices and live the life that you want to lead. So yeah, my passion absolutely is like you guys, let's try and make it completely a typical place so that the world accepts some of those, like you said, slightly strange behaviors, which is completely normal because everybody has got their normals, and the world needs to understand that autistic individuals have their normals. But I also don't enjoy watching anyone, child, adult, teen, whoever, have symptoms that might cloud what their true potential is.
So what are the most common challenges that your clients face, Lottie?
So this is an interesting one, because I often get parents bringing their children to me and saying, these are the things that we might be struggling with. And I'll say, let's look at the whys behind it, because if we can go back to the wise start the process of trying to recreate balance in your body, and the parents are all for it, and the kids are going, yes, but I don't want my food to change, or I don't want something to change. So honestly, the biggest challenge probably is partly parents going, good Lord, this is hard. And I take my hat off to parents who change diets, because it is tricky. And one of the reasons it's really tricky is one of the number one things I always suggest is taking gluten out, taking dairy out. And it is a huge deal, because these children can actually be quite addicted to it. So gluten and dairy are known to create an opioid type structure in their bodies. They can't break them down like they should be able to, and they literally create an opioid structure in the same way that morphine is an opioid structure and you can become addicted to it. So hence, some of these kids are addicted to dairy and gluten, and when you then take that away from them, you can get major crashes, major behavior problems, because they're literally coming off opioids. So at that point, we have to go, that is a huge challenge for families, it's a huge challenge for children. But what we see is we can come out the other side and put the improvements and the goals in place that we're going to get some really great results at the end. But it's tough, it is tough in the middle. So that is a tricky part. And obviously we do know that autistic individuals can really prefer beige food, and it's scary to change. Routines are needed, and we need to try and join those dots together, which is, this is the goal that we want, this is how we're going to get there, and it's tricky, but I will help along the way. And there's always ways and means around it, but that's certainly a tricky scenario I do appreciate with foods. How about you guys? Challenges that you face?
Well, I mean, challenges for me, or challenges for our autistic children, young people and adults. I mean, the difficulties they experience, and Mandy will probably sort of fill in a bit more, but sort of difficulties understanding, interpreting and processing language, whether that be verbal or non-verbal, and you know, sort of, which presents a huge barrier when you think of how much, you know, information that you are taking in when speaking to somebody or listening to somebody. You know, there's visual and there's audio, and it's the National Autistic Society sort of talked about a too much information campaign, you know, and they're just overwhelmed by all of this. You know, not being able to pick up the normal unwritten rules of social interaction, such as, you know, how close you stand to somebody and things like that, which everyone else just seems to pick up very easily. You know, recognizing and understanding feelings, all of these kind of issues just don't come so naturally to an autistic person. As you say, you know, difficulties in coping with change, and so changing a diet, very much so. You know, they like to have the same sort of foods, you know, and again, Mandy, I'll leave you to talk a bit more about that, but certainly my experience has been that an awful lot of autistic people benefit from having gluten or dairy removed from their diet, and certainly that's one of the things at our groups. If we provide refreshments, they are, you know, gluten and dairy free. But Mandy, you can probably add a bit more, really.
Yeah, I mean, when I was first asked this question, you know, what did I think the most common challenges were faced by autistic people? I mean, my short answer is overall it's a lack of reasonable adjustment by the rest of us. There's some very unreasonable expectations made of people in terms of society generally trying to normalize everybody, trying to make everybody fit in the same box. In terms of things like sensory overwhelm, social overwhelm, all of those things can be massively draining. And although there's plenty of autism awareness out there these days, there's still quite a lack of understanding and acceptance. And one of the things I think that people struggle with is that an awful lot of what autistic people are experiencing is internalized. It's not something you can see. It's not something that you can notice necessarily. So you're only going to notice when they're not coping, and you see behaviours that you think are a bit questionable. You mentioned, for example, change. I mean, unexpected change for a lot of autistic people can have a massive impact on their levels of anxiety. Even change that's predictable and expected and that they've been prepared for can have an impact. And there are, schools of thought out there at the moment that one of the reasons that I think it's something like 70% of autistic people go on to develop a coexisting mental health condition is because the uncertainty and lack of preparedness for uncertainty is something that leads them to have increased levels of anxiety throughout their life. And so if you can identify autism early enough and get them used to the idea that actually change can be a good thing and change can be a fun thing and an enjoyable thing, you could mitigate against some of them developing some of the mental health needs that they end up with. And that's just one theory. I mean, there's so many links as well between their sensory experience and anxiety. And I know certainly when it comes to food, until recently I was delivering a training on autism and diet. We've just changed it to autism and sensory processing now. But one of the key things I discovered when I was researching that training is that when it comes to diet, it's not just about what the food looks like, it's about what it smells like, it's about what it tastes like, it's about how it's packaged, it's how it's laid out on the plate, it's the texture, the smell, everything. And all of the things that you and I don't really think about, even something really simple like you might offer an autistic child an apple and they're going to go no because you're holding a green apple and they don't realize that that's the same as a red apple, and that's not an apple as far as they're concerned because all the apples they've ever eaten in their life have been red. And it just loads and loads of different complicated things. So yeah, it's a really tricky one. And I have, ages ago did lots of reading around the whole leaky gut idea of the opioids and what have you that Lottie mentioned earlier. And certainly with my eldest child, I know that we had to steer well away from anything with preservatives in it. Gluten and casein didn't seem as much of a problem, but anything with preservatives, and my child would literally just turn into just shut down. They used to call it Sausage Wednesday at school because when they gave her sausages, she just used to zone out for the rest of the afternoon. So they started giving her fish fingers instead, which didn't go down terribly well with her because she loves sausages. But there you go, she's going to love something that makes her feel unusual. So yeah, I do think that it's an interesting area, and I know that diet can have a massive impact.
I think it's also really interesting when you talk about stress. I always speak about stress because I think the typical thought process around stress is very much like, well, what have you got to be stressed about? We're the ones paying the bills, or we're the ones having to go to work. And what we so need to try and spread the word and concept is actually when you are stressed by the hand dryer noise or the light or the touch or the smell, your stress response is huge constantly all day long, and then we wonder why these children are in fight and flight. So they're in stress response all the time, and we know the stress response can lead to longer term problems, more diagnoses of something else that goes on, like you were saying, from a mental health perspective, but also trying to understand that actually stress is incredibly damaging in theory for our gut lining, for our brain, for our neurotransmitters. And we do wonder why you then see what we call behaviors, which is the bucket's overspilled and I can't cope anymore because that noise was too much, that smell was too much, that apple was a different color. And we need to try, and that's where I come in and go, let's also obviously do what you guys are doing, which is how do we make this that we're going to learn how to manage change, but equally I'm going to say, how do we manage to encourage your stress response to come down, which is we can use supplements that are beautiful and calming, we can use anxiety techniques with them, we can use, like you're doing, sensory. So from a functional medicine perspective, I'm always looking at where are your neurotransmitters at, because if you've got way too many excitatory neurotransmitters which are hyping you up and not enough inhibitory which should be calming you, then you are going to feel more heightened, more anxious, more stressed. And we can do something about that and bring you back down again, alongside the sensory, alongside the food, alongside the things that you guys are doing from a day-to-day perspective. So I do think it's a really beautiful way of combining everything. And like you said, actually your children didn't necessarily respond to opioids, and everybody is really individual. So when I work with someone, it's let's find out what you struggle with. So you might not struggle with something where someone else struggles with, like you said, numbers or particular types of things in foods and tomatoes, or we have to figure out what it is that individuals find difficult to digest. And we do know, again, if you've got leaky gut because you're highly stressed all the time and you've had some antibiotics, you're going to react to more foods, because if your lining of your gut isn't solid, you're reacting to the food particles which are leaving the gut, which they shouldn't. So at that point, and now you started reacting to 15 different types of foods that are going in, rather than just the one that you categorically might be struggling with naturally. So yeah, I think stress is such a huge point when you bring that up. It's really interesting.
I think the one thing I'd say about mental health is the absolute need to have a very individualized and personalized approach towards it. I mean, I've mentioned already that, embracing change might be key for an awful lot of people. But we also need to know what else might be underpinning those needs. I've worked with both children and young people and adults who've presented with a variety of mental health difficulties. And it's very much about looking at the way that's presenting and understanding what's underpinning, not just that, but also underpinning it from the autistic perspective. So the things that we don't necessarily automatically think of, but that are unique for that person.
One thing I was sort of thinking through from a mental health perspective, when we've talked about anxiety and we've talked about neurotransmitters and trying to encourage the ability to make that happy hormone yourself in your gut, so that you've categorically got your own that you're making. And the other interesting thing, I've done some testing recently that's happened to come back that serotonin levels have been really high. They're excreting it down the toilet. So we are measuring it coming out in their urine. And then I'm thinking, well, no wonder why your brain isn't feeling particularly calm, because actually your serotonin and happy hormones currently going down the toilet, because you need certain B vitamins to be able to create that serotonin and get it into your brain to help you to feel calm. So it's so important. I always think there's a big dark hole for children transitioning into adult services where they seem to just drop off a cliff. And in children's services, we're quite supportive, and there's people around to help you, from OTs to speech and language to physios, and then suddenly you're become an adult and I haven't got any problems anymore, and it just seems to be that it trails off. And what I tend to find is it is the more teenage adults that are then struggling with mental health because they haven't been supported properly. And that's where I feel like it would be fantastic from a functional medicine to shout from the rooftops, actually, if we get your gut into a really good place, that you're creating neurotransmitters yourself, you're getting it into your brain to help you feel nice and calm, you go forward into adult life with your gut doing the job it's meant to do, and hopefully then reduce our mental health problems. The other area that I'm really interested in is sleep. So something where I've been working in the NHS for 14 years and I've yet to come across a specialist in autism, i.e. you go to your pediatrician and your pediatrician doesn't actually specialize in autism. They specialize in children's health, which is great, but actually what you tend to find is, well, what are you struggling with? I'm struggling with, or my child is struggling with sleep. Okay, we'll give them some melatonin. And I'm saying, yes, but why are you giving them melatonin? In that, why are they not making it themselves? So in your gut, you make serotonin, the serotonin turns to melatonin, and melatonin makes you sleepy. But if you're not making it yourself, then we need to start back here and make it so that you are doing it yourself. So that, yes, fair enough, you might still need some melatonin, but you're still doing a grand job yourself, and here's a top up, rather than you're not making any yourself and you have to have a whacking dose of it. So I'm always trying to go, but why? Because if you don't sleep very well, then you are not going to manage the next day from a stress hormone point of view, to feel calm, to manage the jobs you want to do. And no wonder why, again, we end up with mental health as a result, with a bucket overspilling and I can't cope anymore. So there's so many different aspects and areas that are interested to look into.
Sleep's certainly a fascinating area. I know there's a lot of research out there, and there is a very sort of widely held belief that a lot of autistic people struggle with their circadian rhythm. Anecdotally, I've known no end of people who much prefer to be nocturnal. And when you think about it, they become self-fulfilling, because, of course, At night, there aren't the social demands, there aren't the expectations placed on you. You can pretty much do what you want, and if you're really lucky, your parents will see through it. You know, I mean, I've got my eldest lives at home, and a lot of her social life at the moment is online, as it is for most of us during a pandemic. And the one thing that we have noticed is that her circadian rhythm's been slipping a lot, because she's socializing with people in Canada and America, and so, you know, it makes more sense for her to be up at that time of night, but it's then getting out of that habit is really, really hard. It can work in a positive way. My younger daughter is actually working for the ambulance service now, and so she does shift work, and she can adjust to different shifts really easily, much better than some of her neurotypical colleagues. So, you know, it can work both ways, but it is an issue. And it always worries me when people take the children off to sleep clinics and come back with all the standardized advice for typical children. Some autistic children need noise in order to be able to fall asleep, or they need vibration, sound, you know, all of that kind of thing going on in the background, all of the things that the sleep clinic is saying, oh no, take those things out of the bedroom. And actually, you know, my two both go to sleep listening to ghastly YouTube gaming videos, which I don't understand how anyone can go to sleep listening to that, but that's what they need. And you have to accept that difference, I think.
Yeah, and find the individual that what they need is the thing that they need. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure, do you guys have consults? Do you meet and greet and do assessments, or is it different?
Not in the same way. I must admit I was a little confused by the term. You know, in terms of you know, children, autistic children, you know, their families will get in touch with us, you know, following a diagnosis, or, you know, via, you know, there's referrals via a school, in order to you know, to become a member of Autism Bedfordshire. The person just needs to either have a diagnosis of autism or be on that pathway to get a diagnosis. So we don't then sort of do anything further in that respect. But what we do try and do is then find out as much as we can about each individual child, and the support that we provide to our services is very much tailored to each child. So the staff who work with them know very much what their dislikes are, what their likes are, you know, what might cause them to you know, perhaps go into a meltdown, what calming and soothing steps they can take. So a dietary issues, you know, a whole, plus, you know, as Mandy said, you know, many have other comorbidities. And, you know, we get to try and get to know each individual child, so that, you know, we can spot if they're starting to get anxious, or we can, you know, tailor how they interact at the groups. And we just work at the pace of each child. With our adults, when an adult does come getting in touch with us, then there is a little bit more of an assessment of where they are in their lives and with their autism. But, you know, again, it's then just all geared around, let's see what you are wanting to achieve. And we'll start looking at what are the barriers to that. And in many cases, you know, a bit like in your organisation, Lottie, that, you know, sometimes what they first say is you know, where they're struggling, and actually you peel back the layers and say, actually, it starts very simply with, you know, it may just be this anxiety about actually talking to somebody, and, you know, but they're not aware that that's the case. It's just sort of getting to the real root of the problem and starting there, and, you know, then having their ultimate goal as, you know, that's where we're going to get to, but we're going to do it one step at a time. And Mandy, I don't know if you sort of want to add a bit more.
I mean, when it comes to the work that I do work sometimes with autistic adults in terms of being co-trainers. We have a bank of co-trainers who unfortunately I've not had any opportunity to work with since COVID, but I'm hoping that we'll pick that up in the autumn term and be able to deliver face to face again, and people won't be at risk and we'll be able to bring them back. But for each of my co-trainers, there's a personalised approach. You know, they have different adjustments they need, different things that they might be more sensitive to. You know, one might need a quiet area, one might not. One might not be able to cope in a room with a garish carpet, for example. You know, there's all sorts of things. And what we try to do is find out what those things are so that we can mitigate for those in the training environment, and hope that the training venue doesn't suddenly drop an unexpected room on us at the last minute. So I have to think in terms, basically I have to think like an autistic person, which I'm worryingly good at, in order to be able to second guess what might be a problem when I walk into a venue. It comes in really useful being able to think like that when I do the educational consultancy side of things as well, because I can sit in a classroom and go, "Whoa, this is noisy," or "This is too loud," or "This is," and kind of immerse myself in it. And I've got the luxury that the teachers don't have of being able to focus on that one child and notice everything that they're doing or not doing. You know, the things that the teachers might not see, like the leg bouncing underneath the table, or the hands being wrung, or the picking that might be going on because they're anxious. All of that, you know, some of our autistic children are very, very good at suppressing anything that might make them look different, stand out, because they don't want to be different, they don't want to stand out, but actually it usually comes out somehow, and those are the things that you can kind of zero in on. So I wouldn't say there's a typical consultation when it comes to us, because we will work with different people at different stages, but yeah, there's a huge immersion, I think is the word way of looking at it. What about yourselves?
It's interesting. So from a consult perspective, actually, I've gone completely Zoom based. So that's how we physically do interact at the moment, COVID times. But it is interesting because we have such a variety. So I can have mums bringing their 2-year-olds, not bringing, but fit like over the screen, you know, their 2-year-olds to me going, "I feel like something's not right. Can we look into it?" They have not got a diagnosis, but they aren't responding to their name, they're lining toys up, they are really obsessive with certain things, etc. So let's look into that. And then there's people who can bring their teenagers to me who they are managing in mainstream but only just, and they're having major friendship problems. And then I've got all the, you know, the adults who can come to me who, actually I've got one chap who's a doctor and he's ASD diagnosed and is incredible at what he does, but really struggles with certain parts of his jobs, and he's saying, "How do I manage this part of it? Is there anything you can do to help?" And then I've also got Zoom calls where I'm having 3-way discussions with someone who's in a care facility, and I'm talking to the carer with the parents on, and then the guy, you know, the chap I'm working with and for will come and say hello on the screen and then want to walk off again. So actually consults can look like anything you want them to look like. Lots of times parents and I agree at the start that actually we don't necessarily want the children or the adults to hear what we're talking about, because it's often like actually they struggle with this. And I don't want children, adults, teenagers to hear the things they struggle with, versus actually come in at the end and let's have a 5-minute chat, however it works best for that individual, to say, actually, this is what we're thinking we're going to do. This is why it's going to really help. This is what the goals we're going to set. What do you want to set? This is how we're going to work towards it. So consults are very much aim, goal led. What do you want to achieve? And I'll always make it about the individual. So some people can come to me and say, "I want to be a better footballer." No, they're not going to come to me and say, "I want to be able to have a conversation with the person so I can get a job interview," because they're not. They're going to say, "I want to be able to be whatever they want to be," and I'll always then tailor the goals to what they want, and I'll manage to get it in there. So this is the types of foods that's going to make you really strong so that you can kick a really good football. That helps to be able to get them to draw into what their goals and wishes and wants are. So at least then you can go, what is it that you want out of it? And I'll always get them to lead on what they want, and I'll then try and get that in to work together to aim for that.
I think that's the similarities actually that's becoming apparent between our two organisations, because it's very much, you know, that's how we work. It is very much led by each individual, you know, the support is personalised, and that's what makes us as an organisation different to many other organisations supporting disabilities. There are a number that, you know, are pan-disability. And if you take, for example, our summer activity scheme, the feedback that we get from the parents when their children have been on the scheme, you know, just how much fun they've had and how much it has improved their whole well-being, that usually the behavioural issues for the rest of the summer are, you know, much reduced because they've had this week. But obviously the long summer holidays are very difficult. You haven't got the routine of school in place, and so families will sort of get whatever respite they can. And so many of our families do obviously send their children to our schemes, but we'll also pick up on MenCap and other schemes. But again, we hear over and over again, the children don't fare so well at the other schemes. You know, they have to access them because, you know, they physically are unable to cope with their child over the summer, perhaps because they're working or just the stress and strain. But and it boils down to the fact that it's our really personalised support. We know every member of staff has who's supporting a child has a little key card of, you know, everything about that child, and so, you know, that they're not just kind of lumped in with, okay, well, we'll keep an eye on, you know, there's a lot of them have a big tendency to escape, and you know, if you haven't got your eye on that child, they'll run, you know, and other schemes, you know, aren't geared up at that kind of level to deal with them on that sort of level. So
there has also been some really interesting research recently that autistic people who are widely thought to struggle with social communication and interaction actually don't struggle with social communication and interaction when they're with other autistic people. And, you know, I think we underestimate that and the importance of that, of actually mixing with people who get it, who are a bit more like us. You know, we all do as adults, we gravitate towards people who are a bit more like us, no matter what our neurology. And I think that's something that we can't underestimate. And I think the other, and this is slightly going off topic, so I apologise, but I think that one of the benefits of the pandemic is that it has shown the rest of society what it's like to live with that perpetual uncertainty and anxiety about what's happening next, and unpredictability, and, you know, dates constantly changing, goalposts constantly moving. And one of the key messages that I'm now trying to get across when I deliver training to practitioners or parents is, think about how that made you feel. Your child or your client or whoever it is you'll hear about has been feeling that probably for most of their life. And you've just had a little taste of what it's like to feel that sort of general uncertainty. Imagine living with that all the time, and they're kind of like, oh, I've never thought about it like that. And it is like that, you know, that sort of not really knowing what's going on kind of thing.
Yes, it's so true, isn't it? You really do need to put yourself into other people's shoes. That sign that says walk a mile in my shoes and then come back to me. And actually none of us can in theory really walk the shoes, but actually as long as we're trying to understand what that feels like, in the same way that in my physiotherapy training we're often put into hoists and, you know, hoisted over the bath and hoisted back to your chair and then sat uncomfortably for the next hour, and it's like, you tell me how you feel when you're not positioned right in your chair, and you next time you go and put someone back in their wheelchair, you're going to put them in really nicely and ask them, are you comfortable and is there anything that I can help you with, because you're going to remember that your bum really hurt when you were not positioned properly. So I do think there's this thing of being able to empathize enough to say, do you know what, I don't understand, but if you can communicate and tell me, that would be great. Or finding a way that you can have that conversation, that communication, that ability to say, are you okay, yes or no, where is it, your foot or your knee, like actually it is really helpful to understand. And I think just like following on from one of the questions we were saying, like, what do you get out of your clients, what do you as an organization, what are you seeing as a result? And actually one of the things I'm hearing from you is the ability for them to say, this is my goal, this is you guys, this is how I'm going to help you to do it, and this is the result that we hopefully see. And actually we're working really similarly with the concept of going, what do you want, this is how we're going to get there. And I had one mum come to me the other day, and her little girl was non-verbal, and she was in a mainstream school at the moment but was going to get pulled out of it, and her mum was saying, I want her to not bite her friends, I want her to not poo smear, and I want her to be able to communicate to me what she wants, because it creates such a difficult environment even when I'm pulling out 15 different cereal boxes for the potential for breakfast of what do you want. And obviously that little girl can't tell me that that's what her goals are, that I don't want to bite and I don't want to. So we've got to work together to try and understand that, but we've got to reduce her feelings of what I can see that she might be feeling, because that's how her behavior is coming out. And I hate this concept of, naughty child, because I think in a mainstream setting they get so easily labeled as that, rather than saying, yes, but why are they acting that way? And one of my favorite little girls was that we did do a stool test on her. We found she had fungal overgrowth in her. We got rid of the fungal overgrowth, and her poo smearing stopped, her biting stopped, and she was starting to communicate again and be able to at least make a decision between 2 different types of breakfast, which helps mum to be able to feel nice and calm, to be able to get her to school on time, and then your day progresses easier. So it's that thing of going, what is your goal? It might be to be a footballer, but let's start with what you want, what parents want, try to join it together and create the outcome where someone's then managing to have their environment, the life, the choices that they want.
Absolutely.
One of the things we certainly come across is there's an awful lot of misconceptions about autism. Is it the same for your organisation and your clients? And people don't really understand or are making assumptions that aren't there.
It's interesting. I think we're going to be different on this, because people are generally coming to me because they've done part of their research already, and they're like, I've got nowhere in the NHS, no one's helping me, but I feel like there's a cloud over my child, and they have got more ability than they are presenting, because they're anxious, because they're really aggressive, because they're scared, they're stressed, etc. Can you help? But because parents have already done their research to say, I think you're the person to help me, then I don't necessarily have people coming to me with any misconception of what we're doing. Honestly, the misconception is the other way around, which is when people haven't necessarily done their research to say, I understand what functional medicine does, what they think I'm doing is trying to change that individual and say, well, you shouldn't be autistic, as in, let's change your diagnosis, let's change you from being autistic to not being autistic. Whereas what I'm trying to do is say, you have this diagnosis, but actually there's no reason why. I love, there's a bubble diagram, which is like autism in the middle, and then round the outside is loads of different add-ons that don't necessarily have to be because you're autistic, that you have got anxiety, that you have got sleep difficulties, that you have got behavioural challenges, that you have got. So I'm then trying to go, let's get rid of all these bubbles that are around the outside, which are not necessarily an absolute for autism, so that you can do the thing you want to do. Whereas I find occasionally people are thinking that I do want to change them and that they shouldn't be in the world. Whereas I'm like, we need autistic people in the world, because there are certain things that they can do far, far better than we can. And one of, I had a chap who had got cerebral palsy, but he'd got ADHD and autism, and he found his absolutely perfect job, and no one could do it better than he could, because he was the person who cleaned the instruments for surgery, which is obviously imperative that you do it properly. He counted them in, counted them out, and he was the best person in that department, and they were his skill sets, and he loved it. And at that point you go, we need to join the world to autism, so that we can provide, and the world understands that this is how we are, whether you're neurotypical, whether you're neurodivergent, but that actually all together we are completely who we were meant to be. But let's get rid of the things that are making you struggle.
Yes. I think that's very much what we find. And yes, we're, as an organisation, we're very much of the view that, yes, we're not trying to make these people not autistic or to change them. and Mandy plays a pivotal role with the training of, is trying to educate people to understand that the kind of difficulties that these people face every day, and it's just making usually quite small adjustments, to things that will suddenly make their lives a lot better. Well, you again, Mandy, you're better placed to answer.
I think so much of my training at the moment is about dispelling myths, because people have got a historical understanding of how we used to think about autism, and that's evolved and changed so much over the years. All the old things that were said about theory of mind have kind of almost been debunked, and we now see that it's actually called a double empathy problem. You've got autistic people who think differently to, for want of a better word, typical people, and actually neither of us is wrong. We're different, and we both have to look at it from the other person's point of view. And if you have the capacity to see it from someone else's point of view, then that's what you should be doing, not expecting them to come up to whatever it is that you can do. Things like eye contact as well. I mean, historically, we used to teach eye contact. We used to say to autistic people, look at the brow of the nose, or look beyond the ears. And actually, we shouldn't be doing that, because if an autistic person is thinking about their eye contact, they can't hear you. They can't process what you're saying, because all the energy is going into, right, I've got to maintain the eye contact. Oh, is that too much? Is that too little? Should I blink? And
why should you? If that's
absolutely
something that's going to increase their stress response, why should you have to do something which is a typical norm in the world to make someone else feel better? Because that's not about the autistic individual, that's about the other person feeling more comfortable. Absolutely. So at that point, you need to ask the question, which is that for your benefit or for my benefit? And if it's for my benefit, please don't do it, because I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, one of the courses. Oh, sorry, Jill.
No, I was just gonna say that actually one autistic person said, you kind of think it's weird that I'm not making eye contact. He said, but I find it very weird that you should want to stare at somebody's eyeballs all the time. It just doesn't make sense, and it kind of
And one of the courses we run on autism and behaviour, is based very much on the premise that if a behaviour isn't illegal or harmful, why are we stopping it? Because if we try to just stop a behaviour without understanding where it's coming from, and it's not doing any harm, and it's not, it might be unusual, but it's not dangerous, then, question why we would be doing that in the first place. But if we absolutely feel that a behaviour does have to be stopped because it is harmful or is potentially illegal, then we have to replace it with something else. We can't just stop a behaviour. Sanctions don't work. Behaviours are generally, driven by something, a need or a want. So yeah, absolutely. And going back to what Jill just said about the eye contact, the other thing that autistic people really struggle with is small talk. And as one of our adults said to us fairly recently, why are you all so obsessed with the weather? True.
Yes, very true, very true. Something else I think is important just to throw in there from a misconception point of view in nutritional therapy is that I often get people saying, I don't have a diagnosis, or my son or my daughter doesn't have a diagnosis, can you still help though? And that's where we're trying to get the concept of saying there's a spectrum, just like there's a spectrum of everything. From a physio perspective, I'm going, there's a spectrum of hypermobility, there's a spectrum of things you're going to struggle with. And actually, if you're on the start of the journey, which is, I don't know whether they are or they aren't, or actually the NHS has dispelled us and said, no, there's nothing wrong with you, go away and just manage it, or they're a naughty child. And at that point, I'm saying, but something is making them feel the way that they are and present the way that they are, and if they can't sit still at school and concentrate, then longer term, actually, you don't know where that's going to end. So does that end in them, I don't know, not being able to fulfill certain criteria and not be able to get grades of some variety, or tick the box to be able to say, I can do my driving test, I can be independent? Then actually let's start back here and say, no, you don't need a diagnosis, we can work with you no matter what. And I appreciate when it comes to funding and when you're trying to get someone onto a scheme, occasionally you do need the diagnosis. To me, I do not mind what a diagnosis is when I'm working with someone, because what I'm always doing is looking at that symptom, that person, that individual, that feeling. So I always think, actually, let's kind of try and step away from diagnoses wherever possible, because it's the individual that really matters.
The adult autistic community would love to step away from diagnosis. There's a lot of argument going on at the moment for the fact that autism shouldn't be medically diagnosed. It should just simply be identified, so that people's support needs can be identified, so that you can move on. But unfortunately, we do live in a society where if it hasn't got a label, it might not be eligible for funding, it might not be eligible for certain levels of support. And I would totally agree, we need to move away from that. I think there is nothing that frustrates me more than people bouncing back referrals because the person in front of them doesn't fit a specific set of criteria. And I'm ages ago working as an advisory teacher in another county, I lost count of the number of times we as practitioners supporting autistic people would refer people to the NHS for mental health services, and they'd come back with no, anxiety is part of their autism. No, it's not. And it took me sort of getting quite cross and saying things about discriminatory behaviour to sometimes get these kids seen. And it's an absolute nonsense, but it is the way the world works. There's a wonderful chap called Luke Bearden who writes really passionately about looking at identification rather than diagnosis, and he's got 3 books out now, and I'd absolutely rate him. His arguments are totally sound. But yes, I mean, training we can give to anybody. You don't have to have a diagnosis to have training and improve your understanding. And if it turns out that your child's not autistic, you've not lost anything by having the training. So
no, absolutely. Out of interest, I've always got this question on my mind that I'm always wanting to ask people that work in this field. If you could give the world a gift in terms of saying, if that could stop, the world would be a better place, what would your gift to the world be to start understanding and start doing?
Oh,
well, I kind of, what you just said was going to be what, until you said it, was going to be what my answer is, that yes, that the world sort of understands that these people are individuals just the same as anyone else, and is accepting of how they are without wanting to change them. I mean, that's really what it's all about. As Mandy says, quite a lot of it is trying to sort of put yourself in their shoes, and sort of, if you're sitting in an environment thinking, well, this wouldn't work for somebody, and it's something I think we all very much do in the charity, is just try and imagine what it will be like, if you were in that situation, and nobody wants to feel different and excluded, and you very much want to fit in and be liked, and I think that would be what I would want the world to see, to give to the world, to say, just imagine what it would be like, and treat these people with the respect and patience and whatever that they deserve. That's really,
yeah, it's about tolerance as well, isn't it? I think, and tolerance of difference, not looking at people quizzically because they look different, trying to re-educate ourselves to all be a little bit more polite on that front, and that goes for all difference. But I think tolerance and understanding is what I'd like to see more of.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think that just that non-judgmental ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and not judge, but actually also say, how can I help? What can I do to help make that easier for you? And I think that's why I went into the job I went into, first being a physio. From the age of 7, I was volunteering in special schools going, what can I do? I want to help, to going, right, I'm going to be a physio and I'm going to help. And now I'm going to be a nutritional therapist and I want to help. And I think one of my wishes is also that people don't have to live with areas of difficulty, to go, actually, like you said, don't lump it in with your autism. There's autism, and then there's the things that come with it, and people shove it into the box, which is autism, and it doesn't have to be. And that's my real request, I think, is to start talking about, actually, I'm feeling like this. How are you feeling? And I saw this person, she made me feel better, actually. How about you? Like, go and see this person, or go to Autism Bedfordshire, because actually they made me feel more confident with myself, because they could help me to reach my goals. And you know, and my goal in life to go, this, you know, teenager who came to me and was like, I haven't actually told my friends I'm autistic because I'm so embarrassed by it, but now they don't understand why I'm struggling with small talk and why I can't look at them. Actually, they just get really bitchy with me, versus saying, okay, I understand that. So one, let's teach the world how to help you, and let me help you to feel less anxious, because actually that's not just an autism thing going on for you, that's something else where we go, actually we've tested, we found out there's things we can do to recreate your balance. She can now go forward and go, actually I feel a bit better to now greet my friends, even if I have to say I need you to do this for me, and she can come to them. But it's the world being more tolerant of what can I do to help.
Absolutely.
If you want some more support, you want to come and talk to somebody, obviously if you want to come talk to me, Embracing Nutrition, I'm always open to people Facebook messaging me, emailing me, picking up the phone. I believe my information is here, so if anyone wants to come and talk, I'm at lottie@embracenutrition.co.uk.
And similarly, you don't need a diagnosis to access Autism Bedfordshire services. By and large, we have the helpline that's open to absolutely everybody. You know, we have lots of routes into our services. Training is open to everybody. The helplines are open to everybody, and then for more specific services, then yes, we might ask for a diagnosis for some of those.
Yes.
Perfect.
Well, it's been
lovely to speak to you guys. So thank you very much for your time.
Yes,
Thank you.
and it's been very, very eye-opening. I think it also shows how actually I think we can work together. You know, it seems very complementary in a way.
Absolutely.
In how we're supporting people. So that's great.
Yep, it's been really informative, and I think a really useful chat.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much, guys. It's been really helpful for me as well, just to even speak to somebody who's got the same thought processes but just comes at a different angle.
Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you.
Yes, thank you for your time.